Welcome to the North Shore Performance Podcast, where we take a deep dive into health and fitness for everyday people and the athlete in all of us. I am your host, Jake Wirtz, and with me is my best friend and co-host, Tanner Schenkel. Together, we take an honest look at fitness and discuss how anybody can improve their lives by adopting a healthy lifestyle. Hey guys, back with another episode here at the North Shore Performance Podcast. Today, we're beginning our series. We're going to call it our beginner series, or your beginner bro Bible for you bros out there. Basically, this series is just going to be geared towards people who are new to lifting, new to fitness, and they're starting to get into the workout space. Tanner, your thoughts?
I think it's super interesting to look back at how we started. So maybe if we have a couple seconds, go over like when we decided to commit ourselves to the gym, and kind of go over that and kind of tell how our journey started.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's very interesting because it depends on your background and kind of your upbringing as a kid. For different people, like for me specifically, I was into a lot of sports as a kid. And so my dad was always like, well, if you're going to play sports, then you're going to have to work out and be in the weight room. So they signed me up for the summer, weightlifting stuff at the high school, the strength and speed situation. And that really helped me a lot because not only did I learn how to lift weights and like how to act in a weight room and stuff like that, I also learned how to run. Nobody really thinks you have to teach a kid how to run or sprint, but that stuff all helped me develop athletically. What about you?
I mean, I would say the same thing. We do the strength and speed in the summers together. And then I don't know, as I got older, got the freshman 15, I decided I need to cut down on weight and start working out again. And it's sometimes hard once you are so used to being an athlete, where you kind of take your body composition and how you eat for granted. And once you stop being an athlete, how fast it what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, you keep eating the same way you were when you were an athlete.
Yeah.
Where all you were doing was running around, doing sprints, playing sports all the time. And then you keep eating that way, but you cut out all the activity and you don't realize the balance is off. You know what I mean? Exactly. That's just the way you've always eaten as a kid. That's what happens to everybody.
So I would say that was when I really got passionate about the weight room and stuff like that. Was
that second time around?
Yeah, gaining the freshman 15. And I always tell people that when I talk about like lifting and training, and back me in high school, I wish I had the knowledge that I do now, because it'd be a different story. And obviously hindsight's 2020, and
part of that's just part of that's just your experience as well.
Yeah.
You have so much more experience to base everything off of at this point. Exactly. I think it's really hard for people who don't have that athletic background, since we're talking about beginners. I think that barrier to entry is a lot higher for people who have never either played sports or were in a weight room as a high schooler or anything like that. You know what I mean? If they've gone their whole childhood or teenage years without ever being in a sport or touching a weight room, as an adult, it's a lot harder to start off. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think that's why we're doing this series, is to help the people that were never athletes to kind of figure out the stepping stones in order to get a solid regimen in the gym and get habits created where they're going to the gym, they're working out. So getting started, example, first topic we'll talk about is for the people that were never really athletes, or the people that they're athletes, now they're not, and they're trying to get back into it and get back into shape. So the first topic we'll talk about is how to get started. So the biggest thing to look into when joining the gym is the biggest one. Don't be discouraged, because everyone starts at different levels, and everyone was a beginner at one time. Even the best lifters in the world, they walked in day one and didn't know what they were doing. So it's important to understand that everyone starts somewhere. And I would say the biggest tip I can give related to this topic is knowing your goal and knowing what you want. Because if your goal is to lose weight, you're going to train specifically for that goal. If your goal is to add size, get stronger, you're going to have train a certain way to reach that goal. If you wanted to get stronger, you're not going to go train like a marathon runner. You want to train specific to your goals, and that allows you to see success early and that success is going to make it easier to keep going to the gym. Because if someone's in there constantly failing or not seeing the results they want, it's going to be really hard for them to stick to going into the gym. So I would say tip one, advice one, is know your goal and set up your plan to attain your goal.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times too, when you're a beginner, your goal could just be to get in shape. And it could literally be as broad as that. You know, it seems like when you get a little bit further along, that's when you start deciding like, oh, I should do a cut, or oh, I should do a bulk, or oh, I'm gonna start training for strength, or oh, I'm gonna start training for size. Like I feel like we start to break down into those subcategories of fitness or the subgenres of fitness a little bit further down the line. A lot of beginner people, they're just like, I just want to feel better about myself, like the way I look and the way I feel and stuff like that. I just want to get in shape. And that's such a generic place to start from. I think that's a really helpful tip. Like figure out specifically what you want to focus on, and you can kind of put all of your eggs in that basket, or most of your eggs in that basket, and kind of work towards that, sprint after that. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's a lot easier if you have one or two things that you're focused on. So, and we're very partial to training for strength and training for hypertrophy here. We're very resistance training focused. So that's mostly what we're going to be talking about, but that goes for anything. If you're a bigger person and you just want to lose weight, then maybe the best way to get started is, hey, I'm going to take, a couple 10-minute walks every day. I'm going to, before lunch or on my lunch. And then after dinner, like I'm going to go on a 10-minute walk. And it's like, that's a great way to get started. So tip number one, like Tanner said, know your why, or know what your goal is, what you're trying to do. Tip number two, I find this to be extremely helpful in the case if you're somebody who's intimidated about going to a gym. If you want to get into the weight room, but you're kind of nervous about it. Tip number two, tag along with a friend or a family member who has some experience in the gym or who has worked out before. More than likely, you have a friend or a family member who exercises or likes working out. Ask them if you can join them and if they'd be willing to show you around. Most of the time, if you ask somebody who's a gym rat or somebody who works out a lot, if you can tag along with them, they're almost always going to say yes. They most people will love to show people around the gym and kind of have them tag along for a workout. It can be a lot less intimidating if you have somebody you know and trust to chaperone you through your first couple workouts. I've done that for plenty of friends, or my brother or something like that. It's nice to have somebody with you when you're going through that for the first couple times. Follow along with their workouts for a while, do what they're doing. Even if it's not the best program, that's still better than nothing. And it's a good place to start. The big thing is just start with a really light weight and try to progress from there. Just try to learn the movements, but start light so you don't hurt yourself. If you don't know anybody who likes to work out or goes to the gym, you can always hire a personal trainer, and almost every gym will have some kind of personal trainer on staff. And I know it can cost a little bit of money, but those people are actually like professionally trained to show you how to perform each exercise, and they can show you how to work the equipment that your specific gym has, and then they're solely focused on you, teaching you how to train, teaching you the different movement patterns, giving you a workout plan, stuff like that. So that's always an option. If you don't have anybody personally that to hire a trainer.
Yeah, no, I think those are really good points. I like the idea of going with someone that you trust that has experience, because sometimes it's hard for people to ask questions if they don't trust the person or whatnot.
Or they're afraid that they'll get made fun of.
Exactly. So having someone that you trust that you can go to when you have questions and whatnot, I think is really good advice.
And the other thing too, like you said at the very beginning, everybody is a beginner at some point. Everybody starts from zero.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's this misconception, and it can be intimidating when you're starting off, that you're going to go to the gym and everybody's going to be watching you. Everybody's going to be focused on what you're doing. People don't care. The only way that somebody's going to be focused on what you're doing is if they're an asshole, and there are assholes in the gym, but they're everywhere, not just at the gym. And then B, if you're in the way. So, when you're a beginner, just try to be conscious of the space around you. Try not to get in other people's way, and you'll be fine. Most of the time, if you ask somebody a question and they're a regular gym goer, they're more than happy to help, because somebody probably helped them along the way.
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely pay it forward complex that goes with a lot of people that are in the gym a lot, because they all had someone that either inspired them or helped them through their beginning woes, and everyone kind of wants to give back to someone that was nice enough to show them a couple things. They want to pass on the information. So
All right. Well, now we've talked about how to get started. So now you have a gym membership. Now you're started. The second question that you might have as a beginner is, what should I do? You know, it's really easy to say, oh, join a gym, start working out, but that's extremely vague. What should I do? Now that you've joined a gym or started an exercise routine, you might be struggling with what exercises should you do or what you should be focusing on as a new lifter. There are a million different exercises out there, and it can be easy to suffer from one of my favorite phases, paralysis by analysis. You overthink things. There's a million programs out there, and you're trying to find the perfect one, and that can always, not always, that tends to lead to paralysis by analysis. You overthink things.
yeah, exactly. And like I find myself jumping through different programs, partially because I like enjoy learning about different programming ideas. But I find it really hard to sometimes stick to one, and that's one of my weaknesses. It's you have to ride a program for at least like 4 or 5 cycles to truly get the benefits of it. And I think over analyzing what you're doing out there is going to impede on what you're trying to do. So I guess the best advice I can give to someone is to learn the basics. So like how to hinge properly, how to squat, how to press, how to use their correct fundamentals and the correct technique in order not to get injured, to be able to lift the weight efficiently, and to just have the most success. Because if we're lifting correctly and we're focusing on the fundamentals, that's going to be the most efficient way to move it. It's going to give us the most strength gains as we go on, especially if that's our goal. But the big thing, I mean, we want to obviously progress. That's going to keep us in there, but we also want to stay healthy and not be injured, especially if you're not a beginner in this and never have any lifting experience. It's very easy to get injured if you lift incorrectly. And if you get hurt, you're not going to want to keep doing it because you're getting hurt. So focus on less, don't focus so much on how much weight you're moving, but focus on how you're moving the weight and focus on the fundamentals, and that everything will you'll be able to stack on. You want to build that solid foundation so you can add different concepts as you move forward, but creating good fundamentals around a hinge movement, squat movement, and a press movement is some of the best advice for a beginner on what you should do that I could give.
Yeah, to be clear, that was tip number 3, learning the basics. So we've had our first 2 tips, and now tip number 3 is just to learn the basic movements. And I one of the best pieces of advice I've always heard about this concept is like, don't think about lifting weights or moving weight as like trying to get stronger. You got to do the most weight possible. Think of it as you're actually just practicing the movement. You're trying to perfect the movement. The weight just happens to be a byproduct of what you can do at that time. And then if it gets too easy, you just throw a little bit more on, a little bit more on, a little bit more on. You just gradually increase that. But what you're really trying to do is improve those movement patterns and really, really get those down. Because if you can get those down, the weight will come, the muscle will come, the strength will come. You just need to perfect the movements. And like Tanner said, to minimize injuries mainly, but also to get the most out of it. So moving in from tip number 3, tip number 4, for what should I do? Focus on compound lifts. So now you've learned the basics. Now you've learned how to squat, how to hinge, how to press. And a compound movement is just a multi-joint movement. So any kind of barbell or dumbbell exercise where you're using more than one joint, those are the ones that you're going to want to focus on. That's considered a compound movement. And the reason being is there's a couple different reasons, but the main one is that because you're using multiple joints, usually you're using multiple groups of muscles as well. For example, you know, the deadlift is, a lot of people consider the king of all lifts. And that's because it's a compound exercise that involves almost your entire body. You know, you're using your hamstrings and your glutes, you're using your upper back, you're using your traps. I mean, it just fires off so many different muscle groups in your body with that one exercise. You're getting a lot of bang for your buck. And that's really the reason why we talk about compound lifts. You talk about compound interest and how that builds up over time when you're talking about money and that kind of concept. It's similar with lifting weights. The more multiple joint movements you can use, the more bang for your buck you're going to get. You can do things and focus on smaller muscle groups too. You can do single joint exercises like your bicep curls and your calf raises, and those have their place. But you should prioritize the bigger movements first, like your bench presses, which we're very partial to, your squats, your deadlifts, overhead press, because you're involving so many different joints and so many different muscles. You're really going to get the most bang for your buck.
Yeah, exactly. And like you touched on, like with the CNS firing, it's important to, it's kind of an underlooked element of lifting and being able to lift strong and efficiently is getting your CNS to fire, so your central nervous system. Because people think, oh, it's just your muscles that helps you. Well, your nervous system plays a big role into it because they're the ones that are telling your muscle fibers to actually fire and control, and that will stop firing if it thinks the weight is too heavy or you're going to hurt yourself, stuff like that. So training your central nervous system too is super important, because like lifting heavy isn't like riding a bike. Like your body's going to forget how to lift heavy efficiently because your central nervous system is going to become accustomed to not lifting heavy. So you need to kind of train your central nervous system as you go, and your compound movements are going to train your central nervous system the most versus just doing like a basic bicep curl. The more muscle fibers you have firing, the more your central nervous system is in play.
That's a really, really overlooked part. Like you said, your body is, your body doesn't care about getting yacked. Like
No,
your brain, your body's just trying to survive. So it's going to do anything it can to prevent you from injuring yourself. And that's why, you see like moms that can like lift a car if their baby's trapped underneath it, because in those instances, they don't care if they're getting hurt. You know what I mean? That adrenaline is pumping, and it's a little bit different, but your CNS, if you can train it to handle those heavier loads, eventually those will become easier, not just because you're getting stronger, but because you're getting used to it. As any experienced lifter can tell you, the first time you put a weight on your back or the first time you try to pick up a heavy weight from the floor doing a deadlift, it feels different. But after you've done it once or twice or a few times, you get kind of used to it. And even if you're not, exponentially stronger, you can move it easier because you know what it feels like. The first time you take a weight off the rack for a bench or a squat, I mean, you feel it and you're like, oh man, that feels heavy. Well, after you've done it a few times, you think in your head, you're like, oh, it's not, you don't even think about it. It's just a thing.
exactly. And so that's what we're trying to do with this beginner series, is try to hit on tidbits that are going to help you gain success early and often to get you wanting to come back for more and creating those habits. Now that we kind of covered on what to do, how to get started, now is kind of talking about the frequency or how often you should go and when you should go. So this kind of, it depends on the person. There's not a perfect time for that everyone should go at this time or this many times a week. I would say look at your schedule and look what you have going on. Because if you're stressing yourself out by trying to fit in going to the gym and you think you don't have time, you probably do have time. But if you're stressing yourself out over it, you're not going to want to go and you're not going to enjoy going. And it's just going to be adding to it. So kind of think of ways that you can implement in your schedule that is not going to put a strain into your day-to-day life. For example, say you work a normal 9 to 5, go in the morning, get a good sweat in, get a good pump going, and then that has a great start to your day. And chances are it's kind of like the idea that Navy SEAL general gave a commencement speech. Like making your bed is you're setting yourself up for success throughout the day. Going to the gym, chances are you're going to make better choices throughout the day too if you start your day by working out, doing something, starting your day with a win. Otherwise, or if you have more of a kind of crazier schedule or you're more of a night person, going to the gym at night, like knowing your energy, like if you're a morning person versus a night person, can help you as well sticking to it, because you know when you're more productive, if you're more productive in the morning or the night, and try to make it into your schedule. But I would say usually agreed upon amount of days to go in a week, especially for beginners, is 3 days a week. I remember when I first started training again, I went every other day, and it seemed like an easy thing to commit to. And as you start going and it starts becoming easier, starting creating those habits, you can add more day. Just like we talk about progressive overload, same thing with doing how many days you're going a week, is start adding days to that cycle as you go on.
Yeah, no, I really like what you talked about there. Just trying to fit it in when you can go. I think a really healthy or good idea to do when you're trying to start this kind of habit is at the beginning of the week, look at your schedule for the week, look at your work schedule, other things you have planned. If you have kids that have sports or if you are in school, whatever, just trying to plan what days you're going to go ahead of time. Don't just kind of free will it, willy nilly and just try to, oh, today I should probably go or whatever. Like, no, if you plan it out in advance, you're much more likely to commit to it and stick to it. And that's really the important thing is just making a plan and sticking to it. Kind of like Tanner said, it's smart to start off in the lower end as far as frequency. 2 to 3 days, I think, is a good place to start for most people. It gives them a chance to get into the routine, gives you a chance to learn the movements without overworking yourself because you're still, when you're a beginner, your CNS isn't used to that kind of a workload either. So if you start off on the lighter side as far as days and volume is concerned, you can kind of increase that as you go. That's just another lever you can pull later on when you're stalling and you want to make more progress, is you can add more days or add more frequency. But so tip number 5 kind of leans into that a little bit. Don't bite off more than you can chew. I just saw the other thing Tanner wrote on our show notes there. I can't say it on the podcast, but he's trying to sabotage the show from the inside. Great job, Tanner. Yeah, don't bite off more than you can chew. I've seen a lot of people when they're starting off. I knew a guy at work, for example, he really needed to lose some weight. His doctor told him he had some medical conditions and that if he didn't get his stuff together, it wasn't going to be good for him in the long run. And he made a really amazing commitment and a really amazing body transformation. He went to the gym every day for a year straight. Now, that sounds great. And he did make progress, but that is such a huge commitment. Like you're going to go 365 days in a row. I mean, that's just a lot. And you can kind of overdo it at that point. And then you can lead into injuries from overworking yourself. You might be doing too many things at that point because when you're beginning, you should really focus on a few things and get really good at them. And that's why we're trying to give you guys examples of compound lifts, basic movements, stuff like that. It's going to give you a lot of bang for your buck. But when you're trying to go 7 days a week, 6 days a week, you might be spreading yourself too thin and trying to do too many things. And it's like you're getting good at things that might not really matter and might not move the needle for you. So it would be better to start off in the lower end, like we said, 2 to 3 workouts a week, focusing on things that give you a lot of bang for your buck, a lot of the big movements, and get really good at those and go from there. If you want to add in later, that's fine. But just start off in the lighter end and then kind of go from there. If you overdo it, you're going to regret it in the long run, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also like going in with like a plan, like writing down, like keeping your stuff in a notebook, on an app, something like that, and kind of breaking it in chunks. Like, okay, first 15 minutes, I'm going to warm up. Next half hour, I'm going to do this certain compound lift with accessories. In the last 15 minutes, I'm going to walk on the treadmill. Like breaking it up and with time specific categories is going to help you stay dialed in and stay committed to it, because it's like, I don't know, I always feel if I go into a workout with a plan, my workout are usually much better than if I just wing it as I go. So I think having a plan too when you go in there is helpful. It doesn't have to be like specific, like I'm gonna bench press 85 95 percent of my 1 rep max. Like just say like 15 minutes I'm gonna warm up, 30 minutes I'm gonna lift, 15 minutes I'm gonna do cardio, I'm gonna get in and get out. Like just having kind of a set block, it's kind of easy to stay on track.
Yeah, and that's a good way of pacing yourself too, because like you said, you did what 10-minute warm up, 15-minute warm up or whatever, 30 minutes of lifting, and then 15 minutes of just some light cardio or whatever. That's a good routine to get into. You wouldn't want to start off going, 6-7 days a week doing 2 hours of lifting. That's a good way to burn yourself out, get injured, and not make significant progress in the long run because you might not keep going. The other thing too is you want this to be a habit that's sustainable. If you want to get in shape real quick for summer and you do like a 12-week like summer shred countdown thing, it's like, okay, you might make some progress, but then if you stop at the end of the 12 weeks, then you're just going to go right back to where you were at. The important thing is to find a way to make this a sustainable habit you can keep up for the rest of your life. I mean, that's one of Tanner's and I's goal, is to be able to lift for the rest of our life. You know, we don't have kids yet, but that's coming down the pipeline. And when we have a family, stuff like that, we still want to be able to find a way to keep this into our, you know, our routine and our lifestyle, because then we can kind of pass that on to our kids and stuff like that. But I think it's really important to maintain this habit throughout the rest of your life, to have a healthy life, not just like a quick, you know, 12-week cut or shred or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, we're not trying to I don't know the exact
There's no
is.
quick fixes here.
Yeah,
It
it's
has to be
creating the
something you
fundamentals
commit
that,
to. Yeah.
yeah, creating fundamentals that's going to be something that could be a lasting habit that is going to make your overall health and wellness better as you go and as you age.
So just kind of summarizing, this is the first episode of our beginner series, our beginner bro Bible, for those of you that like the alliterations. So our big tips today, tip number 1, know your goal, know your why, try to figure out what you're going for, why you're trying to get in shape, what's the reason that's bringing you to this point. Tip number 2, tag along with somebody who's been to the gym before, a friend or a family member. If that's not really an option, get a trainer. They can kind of show you how to do the movements and learn how to use different equipment and stuff like that. It's a good place to start. Tip number 3, learn the basics. So really get good at those basic movements. You can build off of those later. Tip number 4, focus on your compound lifts, your compound exercises, things that use multiple joints, multiple muscle groups. You know, when you're a beginner, your time might be limited. So you want to do as many things that are going to be as efficient as possible, get the most bang for your buck in that regard. So focus on compound lifts. And tip number 5, don't bite off more than you can chew. Start off with something that's sustainable, attainable, and something that you can do for a long time. Don't burn yourself out. Don't get injured. Don't overwork yourself. And then you can kind of build from there. If you feel like you've been doing 2-3 days a week for a couple months now, and you're like ready to add another day or two or another session a week, then do that for a few months after that. If you want to add another day, you can do that. I mean, that's a lever you can pull when your progress stalls. So don't use that all right away, because that's something you can do when your progress stalls. It'll kind of break through some plateaus. So Tanner, what do we have coming up for the next episode in the beginner series?
The next one we're touching on would be, we're talking about nutrition. We're going to also do another episode on like proper gym etiquette and not how to get like hated on.
Yeah, some of the unwritten rules of the gym.
Yeah. And then we're going to work towards on kind of create a beginner program that we can send out and put in like the show links and stuff like that.
That's the one I'm the most excited about. I think we're going to wrap up this series with a basic 2 to 3 day routine or program that a beginner can do, that you can run for, 6 months and then go from there, but really establish some good fundamental movements. So Tanner and I are really excited. It'll be one of the first programs that we've kind of put together and, released to the public. So we're really excited about that. I'm looking forward to that.
Exactly. And then you can kind of see how our brains think with programming and try to, make it so you can make your own program and kind of see our thought process and whatnot. So
yeah, exactly. So I think that's going to do it for us today, guys. Please check out the next video. Leave a like, a share, a follow, do all that fun stuff at the end of this video. Please tell your friends and your family about us. If you have anybody in your life that's also trying to look into fitness or add some exercise to their life or healthy tips and tidbits. So we're going to be trying to post a little bit more frequently. It's been hectic with both of our work schedules, school schedules. Tanner's doing an internship right now as well. So he's the busiest man on earth right now, I would assume. So we're going to try our best to be a little bit more consistent with getting some content out there for y'all. And yeah, thank you so much for watching.
And as always, no excuses,
no regrets. Bye.